The following program is a production of WLRN.
We now visit the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center, a living memorial rooted in education. Through eyewitness accounts, the survivors teach the universal lessons learned from the Holocaust.
The images seem innocent, but soon turn haunting. A life with promise becomes suddenly tragic. A story of survival, never to be forgotten. Today, South Florida is home to the second largest Holocaust survivor population. Their eyewitness accounts are at the very heart of the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center in Hollywood. It is through their stories and their unwavering dedication, lessons are learned and their memories of hope stay alive.
I'm a daughter of a Holocaust survivor, so my whole life I've always felt the impact of my father's story and his words, and it's always meant so much. But being a survivor, I thought, that happens in the families. But the impact survivors, we began to realize, had on students, on people, on the general public was amazing. Now, the other thing about survivors, they made a promise to those they left behind that they will never forget. They will tell the story. If it's promised to their parents, to their loved ones, to the martyrs, that was their major, major mission. If they survived, that's what they were going to do.
In 1979, a public hearing was held in the community to see if there was a need and an interest to have a memorial dedicated to the Holocaust. The support for it was overwhelming, with the community responding unanimously yes.
Our founders, the late and beloved Arnold Picker and the late and beloved Abe Halpern, decided that they were going to do what they called a living memorial through education.
It would be important for us to take the oral history of as many survivors and partisans and liberators as possible, so that there would be a verifiable set of products that people who wanted to do research and wanted to study and wanted to find out really what happened, they'd have access to this library.
Foreseeing the future, the founders of the Holocaust Center decided to include college and university presidents, making this living memorial non-denominational for educational purposes, therefore welcoming and encouraging everyone to participate.
The vision of our founders was so incredible because doors opened to us that otherwise would never have been open. Dade County Public Schools came to us afterwards in the middle 80s. They understood we existed. They said there's one line in the history books on the Holocaust, you have to do something about it. With that in mind, we developed a curriculum at that time. We were also trying to forge having Holocaust education mandated. It took from 1984 to 1994 for Holocaust education to finally be mandated.
Other programs began to develop, like Student Awareness Days, where young people engage in dialogue with survivors and learn the dangers of racism and hate. In addition, students are encouraged to participate in the visual arts and writing contest, some in the form of song.
This is the story of our world, the story I hate to tell, but still needs to be heard. We live our lives in constant circles. It seems misery is what we live for. Never find an end to the pain.
When I wrote it, I didn't want to pretend that I knew the kind of suffering that Holocaust survivors went through. So I figured I'd focus more on the never again aspect. So I wanted to make it very clear that I wanted people to remember this event and never let it happen again, which is why when I wrote the song, that's the idea that I had. The first line of the song, this is a story of the world that I hate to tell, but it needs to be heard.
This is the story of our world, the story I hate to tell, but still needs to be heard.
everything that I had ever understood about the Holocaust, seen, read, heard, and really from my father, who had been through 11 camps, he always talked about the trains and the trains and the trains. And when I began to learn more and realized that during the war, the train should have brought food to the front, could have helped in so many ways, it was more important for the Nazis to transport Jews to death. If it wasn't for the trains, they would never have been able to transport the amount of people they did to their death.
Recently, the center has acquired a rail car, one of only 8 in the world, to be displayed when their museum opens.
We're standing in the actual building where the first South Florida Holocaust Museum is being created. And as you can tell by looking at the posters, we're going to start the story with children. This will be the first South Florida Holocaust Museum, the first in North America to tell the story in English and Spanish. We're going to start with life before. We're going to tell you about a people, who they were, how they fit in, and then we're going to walk you through the whole process of what happened chronologically in the Holocaust. The end of the day, when they finish, we know that every single visitor, regardless again of race, color, creed, age, that walks through this museum will be changed.
You can find out more about the Holocaust Documentation and Education Center by logging on to hdec.org.